Hey guys, I have something I want to talk about today. It's going to be about Christianity. Pretty much what I watched on Netflix was a documentary about. It was called "The God That Wasn't There." So of course, me being on Netflix, I was bored as hell, and I was like, you know what, I'll just go ahead and watch it. When I did, I didn't expect to see what I saw, I guess. Pretty much, it was a bunch of stuff that I'd already heard before, but there was something that I didn't actually know. And the interviewer guy was, of course, like, okay, well, do you know what happened after Jesus died? They couldn't answer. They couldn't answer the question. He went out and interviewed these random ass people on the street outside of a like football game. He was like, what's the deal when, Jesus was resurrected after the third day? After that point, what happened? And they were like, oh, God's love came into embrace, and, he died for our sins, and everybody was cleansed. And it was like, yeah, but what actually historically ended up happening after that was, okay, so in 0 AD is what people like to call it. They like to call it after death because they're talking about when Jesus comes to the earth and he's going to die. But AD doesn't actually mean after death. So, and they call BC before Christ. So pretty much, Jesus was apparently born on 0 AD. And with that, he apparently lived for 33 years. His estimated death, technically 32 AD, but people like to say 27 AD, and there's a lot of people that like to say 30 AD. It's kind of screwy. From when he was a baby to about 13 years old, his life was pretty documented. Like, he went and got lost for 3 days, and his parents couldn't find him, and I guess after the second day, they were like, fuck, we gotta go look for him. And then they went to the temple, and he was sitting there with all the Jewish guys. I don't remember what their deal was. And he was talking to them, and they were like, why'd you leave? And he was like, how didn't you know I was going to do my Father's work? And it's just like, okay, Jesus, settle the fuck down. So they take Jesus back, and we do not hear about Jesus from 13 years old until 18 when he needed to be baptized by John the Baptist. We seriously don't know where he went or what. Like, those, 5 years? We didn't know where he was. And then when he was 18, he was just like, fuck it, I need to get baptized by John the Baptist. So, that's when Jesus, came back into frame being like, oh yeah, saving you, or whatever. And from that point on, the miracles started to happen, which technically could have just been him, like, being like, got your nose, fucking shit, man. But, no, he was hanging out with lepers and whores and all that kind of shit, and making people that were sitting there getting carried on mats wherever they had to go, like fucking a douche Aladdin, and making them be able to walk again and all that kind of shit. So everybody was like, oh man, that's black magic. And he was saying that, I'm the son of God, bow down to me and kill people before me if they don't believe in me. And it's actually what they said. It's actually what it says in the Bible. Anyway.
But we don't do that now. We're not aggressive Christians, even though our Bible is.
So all of that went down. From 18, or actually 27 to 30, he was going through the whole deal of, like, the Jewish people were trying to catch him, and he was just being a renegade, and they were like, what the fuck, we gotta deal with this asshole. So they were like, fuck it, let's do it. So they of course knew where he was the whole time. They just couldn't bring him in for what he was saying for a while there. But, they end up, let's just go to Passover. So the night before Passover, Jesus is taken in to talk to the Jewish council, right? And they're like, okay, if you're gonna die tomorrow, we're gonna crucify you, blah, 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 blah. And the guards, like, beat him up and kicked him the fuck out. So that's when they had, Passover. And then, he was crucified after. I don't have to tell you the story. I'm pretty sure you know it. But the only problem with all of that is Saul, or Paul, whatever you want to call him. Jesus came to him. I don't remember what specifically he came to him for. But I know he did, because I know Paul was an asshole before. And then he saw Jesus, and then he was like, oh my God, there's Jesus. So he started documenting his life, and the only thing that Saul ever documented about God, and he knew him for years before the resurrection, the only thing that he remembers is the resurrection. That's the only thing he wrote down. He didn't remember all of these miracles and all this jazz. After Jesus died in 27 AD, 30 AD, or 33 AD, whatever you choose to believe in, there's a lot of ideas going around that it was in that time area. Anyway, so after he died, not until 70 AD is when, I think it's Mark, Luke, and John, those books were being written, and that's the ones that talk of all this miracles and all that, and those were being written in 70 AD, 100 AD, in that area. So it was taking a long ass time for them to write this shit. And okay, you're seeing the either the 40-year gap or the 45-year gap, where it's like he died and then this chunk of space, this is when he died, this is when the books were being written about him. Like, he is gone for this period of time, I use my head to point, but he's gone in this period of time. Or not gone, but, how he was taken to heaven by a cloud. This time frame, nobody ever talked about him ever again. Nobody. Nothing was talked about him. People forgot. And it was like, what the fuck is that? Because you think if there was a guy that was, living in the same time as you, being like, oh yeah, I'm the savior, oh yeah, I can save everybody, I'm gonna save everybody, blah 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 blah, look at me just shooting out my word salsa out my asshole, like I'm gonna fix everything. You think that you'd remember that for like the rest of your life, like how people remember John Lennon, Carl Sagan, who else is good? Nelson Mandela talked about stuff like that. Not that he's going to save everything, but he was a big part of the act for equality for black folk, people like Martin Luther King Jr., people like that you'll never forget. They're going to be talked about through history all the time because they deserve the attention for one, and two, they were just absolutely fabulous people, and there would be absolutely no reason why we would forget their contribution to society. But why did these people? And during 70 AD to 100 AD, they were writing about his miracles, per se. I say per se because they probably weren't miracles. Anyway. Oh, it's about to rain. Anyway, they weren't miracles, per se, because they weren't documented by Saul. Saul was the one documenting everything of Jesus' life till the point of his death, from like 18, I think. That might be a little bit wrong. I'm not entirely sure. But, after Jesus was baptized, he had to fight the devil for 40 days and 40 nights out in the desert. Of course, everybody knows that story. And it's like, why was there such a big ass time, span where they didn't say anything about him? Like, nobody talked about him. Nobody said anything. No one said anything. Until 70 AD, they were all like, yeah, we remember now. It's that guy that was like, hey, I'm your God. Like, And it's just like, what the fuck is that? The guy that was born out of a virgin, like, You know what I'm saying? It's not like somebody just could have shot a load into a bucket and then she, like, gets in the bucket to take a shower or whatever, or some crazy shit, because I know that's happened with, like, girls in pools. Whenever, like, dudes jack off into them, they have a chance of getting pregnant, which is very unlikely, but it's happened. It's not a scientific oddity, but, I mean, they literally talk about nothing that would have gotten her pregnant. Maybe she had sex with an angel. I don't fucking know. You know, it's just crazy how there could have been a time gap this long, and then, you know, everybody was like, oh yeah, you know, he turned water into wine and also fed bountiless fish to a bunch of these fucking fishermen, and then he used to touch people that had a serious skin disease that is still going on today, and somehow made them magically better. And it's like, you know, if you would think, with how much medical science has progressed in the past few years, that we would figure out something like that, like a pill that you could take, but, like, no. This one guy, back in when they were still having interbreeding problems, like, we still do too, but, I mean, it's not like, you know, you had to fuck your sister. You don't have to fuck your sister now, but you kinda had to back then, because there was literally nobody on the planet anymore, because apparently, you know, after the flood, which is incredibly disgusting to think about it, honestly, that we're all just remnants of that one guy that built the biggest boat of all time to hold so many fucking things that it would have sunk to the very bottom of the fucking earth if the flood would have happened. There's no scientific evidence of the flood. There's no fringe scientific evidence of the flood. The only people that, you know, are like, oh yeah, the flood happened, is those crazy people in Australia. So, I mean, like, I don't understand how everybody can just be buying into this when there's absolutely no evidence to support it whatsoever. Not only that, but it's just, you know, with a little bit of common sense, you can kind of realize that when you think that if some guy came down here, or actually created everything 6,000 years ago, of course, how the fuck do they account for, you know, light years and things like that, or that are actually measurable by math? How do creationists explain that shit? Like, you look at a star that could be 100,000 light years away, and in reality, that star could have been dead for, like, a long-ass time. It's like, that star could have been long gone for a while now. Like, if our sun were to die today, like right now, right, in 8 minutes, for 8 minutes you'd still have sunlight, but until then, after that 8 minutes and 56 seconds is over, then we wouldn't have light anymore. But we'd still be able to survive for actually a long time. But, you know, it's just like, if they can honestly say that the world is 6,000 years old, and that a guy got 1,400 animals on board this wooden rickety piece of shit boat, and went around talking to everybody like, it's gonna happen, holy fuck, it's gonna happen, for, like, you know, 70 to 100 years, because apparently this dude lived until he was, like, 800, when, you know, not only was sanitation, like, a super huge issue back then, they were interbreeding, they were just, half of these guys were probably retarded, and, like, the first guy that sat down and said, I'm gonna write a book, was the only non-retarded guy in history back then. Have you ever thought about it?